Good evening, brothers and sisters in the Lord Jesus Christ, who may have gathered with us on today for our time together in Bible study. I want to certainly welcome you one more time as we spend these moments together. And I trust and pray that you've had a good day, a blessed day, a day in which you have been highly favored and you have received once again blessings from God that are numerous. When we start counting our blessings and naming them one by one, clearly there are so many times when we can see exactly what the Lord has done. All right, we're going to move hastily into our lesson tonight. And of course, it may be with some bit of brevity by comparison to our other times together, but we're going to continue in our series that we've been on dealing with these negative emotions and understanding the negative emotions and learning how to adapt and to adjust and to address the negative emotions that we oftentimes face and deal with in life. And so on Sunday, we dealt with the negative emotion of fear and how our faith must overcome our fear. Excuse me. How our faith must overpower our fears, how our faith must rise above our fears. And so tonight we're going to address another emotion that is common to us, and that is the emotion of grief, the emotion of grief that is common to us as we think about where we are in relationship to our calendar and the time of year. We know that we are just a few days away from Thanksgiving and the celebration of that day, which is considered to be a major holiday or one of the uh, more major and bigger holidays. And then, of course, following it comes Christmas. And so back to back months, November and December, times which are times that should be high in celebration and filled with so many great and precious memories. And yet, for those 2 months of the year and those two holidays and those two seasons, Thanksgiving and Christmas, for many, they are moments where we basically kind of have a little bit of breakdown. And the breakdown comes because of a sense of loss that possibly occurred within the very month itself, the month of December or the month of November, and missing people that you are accustomed to spending time with and enjoying a life with and enjoying those moments with, the exchanges that come and all of that during that time that's now missing, that's now absent. And so we're going to talk just a moment tonight about the feeling and the emotion of grief, the feeling and the emotion of grief, and how quite possibly it is a negative emotion that you are dealing with. And if you're not dealing with right now in the very present, it is one that you've had to deal with in the past and over the years. And if perchance you are blessed and have not had to deal with it, then certainly know this, that the day will come as life itself continues to cycle sooner or later. The cycle of life is going to take place on the doorstep of your residence, and you're going to have to learn how to adjust and how to adapt to this season and to this emotion and of guilt, and not guilt, I'm sorry, but of grief. And so um, the book of Ruth, really all four chapters of the book of Ruth. I just want to kind of focus on chapter one and the opening verses of chapter one, because there we discover some real people with a real problem, and that real problem is what we are talking about tonight, and that is the problem of grief. How do I manage it? How do I handle it? How do I accept it? How do I, you understand, learn how to live with it as being a part of my life that I can't seem to get over, can't seem to get around, look like I can't even seem to get through it, look like it's just sometimes handles me a little bit tougher at some days and some seasons than others, but it is a real part of my life, and I'm still struggling, I'm still straining, I'm still stressed out with this matter of grief. Well, let's read verses 1 through 6 of the book of Ruth. I hope that you've got your Bible and you're ready to join me there. Let's read verses 1 through 6 of chapter 1. And of course, I certainly encourage you to read the entire chapter, and for that matter, to read the entire book. It's not a lengthy book, so read the entire book, because you will come to discover that with each chapter, things change. With each chapter, things change. With each chapter, things become a little bit better and brighter. And so it is tonight. I hope that these few moments together will provide some source of strength and encouragement for you as we look into the Bible and we find something that may be relevant for us at this moment and during this time. All right, chapter 1, verse number 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Oprah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters in law, that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. All right, I'm going to end my reading right there and make some reference to, if you will, Ruth. Make some reference to Ruth. I guess, given that the book is named after her, we'll consider her possibly the main character. We'll consider her the main character. And obviously, there are a number of characters that are named and are listed in the course of chapter 1. And of course, there are other persons who become central characters later on as you go from chapter 1 to chapter 4, and that being particularly a man by the name of Boaz. All right, so let me just probably start with this introductory statement, and that is that death is not the only cause of grief. Death. Usually, when we think of the word grief, our mind immediately goes to death, dying, someone being deceased, and what we may feel or what we may be experiencing in terms of our emotional response to that. And that emotional response is called grieving or grief. And so I wanted to begin by making it clear that grief can come from more than one direction. And I won't spend a lot of time trying to talk about all of the directions it can come from, but I will suggest to you that when we look at the book of Ruth, that there are possibly in these 4 chapters of the book of Ruth, 4 possible ways that one could experience grief in their lifetime. 4 things that could contribute to grief. I think that when we take a real careful look at Ruth's life and Ruth's story, that we could put our finger on some things beyond just death itself that could be responsible for a person grieving or a person having some grief. Okay, Rev, where you going with that? Well, let's just do this. Let's just begin possibly in a place where you think I wouldn't begin. Let's begin with Naomi. We're talking about Ruth as being the primary character, but we know that Naomi, who is Ruth's mother-in-law, is a character, and I'm bringing up Naomi because of the relationship. You've got Ruth, and then you've got Naomi, and Naomi is the mother-in-law. And I guess what I'm getting ready to say, and I ain't trying to start anything. I'm getting ready to say that it's possible that a person can have some grief, and a person can experience grief from someone within the family. And of course, I didn't want to necessarily say it's your mother in law, or it could be your mother in law. All I'm simply saying is that when we look at the lesson, when we look at this particular book of the Bible, when we look at the chief characters, we've got to be able to put our finger on the fact that Ruth is a chief character, but also Naomi is one. And I know we're thinking about grief. I know we're talking about grief. And I know that our minds go to the fact that when you talk about grief and grieving, you're usually just thinking about death and dying and somebody's demise. But I suggest to you tonight that beyond just death itself, that sometimes in-laws can give you a lot of grief. Oh, yeah, in-laws can cause a lot of grief. I know some of y'all are feeling me. I know some of y'all are probably shouting right now, saying, Lord Jesus, amen. You know you're right, Reb. Oh, yeah, I know I'm right. That there are times when your grief can come from another direction. It can come from another dimension. It can come from something even like relationship with in-laws that are not as favorable as they ought to be, are not as kind as they ought to be, is not as good as they ought to be. You understand what I'm saying? So when we look at Ruth's story, and we understand that she's not a person isolated, in the world all by herself. She is a person who has some in-laws and who got some relatives, and the bottom line is she could have got grief from that relationship in addition to the grief that she got from the loss of her husband. All right, so again, I say death is not the only thing that can cause us grief. Well, what's another thing that could cause us grief? What do you know about Ruth, and what do you know about this Bible story that we could put our finger on that could potentially cause some grief? Well, I tell you what, let's look at the fact that after the death of her husband, she was unemployed. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. See, when you go from chapter 1 to chapter 2, you discover that in essence, um, Ruth is moving from Moab to Bethlehem. And when she gets to Bethlehem, she's unemployed. She has no source of income. No, no, no. She don't have no job. She don't have no retirement. She don't have no social security check coming in from her deceased husband. She is literally, economically, she is busted. Oh yeah, she's unemployed. She's unemployed. And let me tell you something, when you ain't got no job, that can cause you some grief. Oh yeah, when you got needs that have to be met. You understand? You got to eat, you got to have somewhere to stay, and the list could go on and on and on. When you are unemployed, when you have no source of income, just that particular thing all by itself. I ain't talking about nobody dying. I'm talking about your being, you understand, broke, busted, and disgusted. You can be going through a season of grief and grieving because you don't have you understand, your money is funny and your change is real strange. And so all I'm saying is that we ought not think of grief and grieving as being something that only happens to a person when someone in the family dies. When your money is like that, and like Ruth was, because she was unemployed when she got to Bethlehem, Judah. She had relocated to another country, to another space, to another city, among new people, and there she was, having to live there and don't have anything to live on. And so that's what chapter 2 kind of helps us to understand. But she goes from chapter 2 into chapter 3. And when you get to chapter 3, what you will learn about Ruth is not only now has she lost a spouse, and not only is she unemployed, but you'll also have to put your finger on the fact that she is single. She just, yeah, she's single. She's single, however you want to define single, she's single. Sometimes people think single means you've never been married. Well, you could have been married, but now you're divorced, and because you're divorced, you're single. You could have been married, but your spouse passed away, and now that the spouse is no longer there and you haven't remarried, for all practical purposes, you're single. I know you could check the box and say, I'm a widow, but you are a widow who is a single woman. Oh, yeah, or a single man. And so it is. When we look at Ruth's life story, we've got to underscore the fact that she was single. That means she was having pretty much to try to make it on her own. Oh, yeah, I understand. She still got Naomi. She still got her mother-in-law. But for all practical purposes, you understand, when it comes down to her being, you understand, connected to somebody, united to somebody in a more loving way and an affectionate way, and in a relational way, she is a single person. There's only so much she can do with her mother-in-law, and only so much her mother-in-law can do for her. But as a person, you understand, who wants to connect with somebody and be connected with somebody, the bottom line is that sometimes when you're single, there's a sense of grief, you understand, identified with your life. You want to be happy. You want to be with somebody, but you want to be with the right somebody. And so sometimes you're having to learn how to keep on keeping on. You understand, with yourself, by yourself, for yourself, and all that type of stuff. So grief can come from the fact that in essence you feel like I ain't got nobody, and you feel like nobody wants me, and you feel like, you understand, I may never find the right somebody. And so, grief can come in through almost any possible way in that scenario. And so don't think that everybody who's grieving in this world is grieving because they lost someone to death. Okay, I'm getting ready to say something. I hope you're ready for this one, but I ain't trying to start nothing. sometimes you've got to deal with what happens in chapter 4. What happens in chapter 4, Rev? In chapter 4, now she is married. She married. Who she married to? She married to a man by the name of Boaz. All right. Okay. I don't see where there's no grief in that. Well, all I'm getting ready to say is that as I try to tread this very carefully, is that sometimes uh, you can experience grief from your married life. You can experience heartbreak and pain from your married life. You can be married to somebody, and you would hope that you understand it would be a good time and a great time and a good relationship and a great relationship. But sometimes you done married up to the wrong person. You done got hooked up to the wrong person. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That when you look back at your life and you look back at your choice, you're simply sometimes thinking, man, you understand, I've experienced more grief than I have joy because of this marriage relationship. And so sometimes, we get into something and don't know what we're getting into, or we get into the wrong thing, or we jump into something. We jump on the first bus that comes. And well, I tell you what, sometimes you ought to just wait a little while, because you might ought to miss that bus, because it ain't the bus that's going to take you where you want to go, and just keep standing there, because another bus will be on sooner or later, and it may be the bus that's really going to get you where you're trying to get to. Yeah. So all I'm simply saying is that there are people who are experiencing some grief in life, and that grief is happening because of a marital relationship that has gone sour, that's gone bad, where you understand things is no longer like Little House on the Prairie, is like Nightmare on Elm Street. All right. Well, that's all I'm going to say about that. But I just wanted to kind of make it clear that you understand people can be grieving, but be grieving for more than one reason in relationship to what we commonly think, and that being death. All right. So when we again address the characters of the lesson, we've got to underscore the fact that not only is Ruth a person who is grieving, but clearly, when we read verses 1 through 6, we discover that Naomi is also grieving. Two women in the Bible, and they are both experiencing grief. Well, um, I know I don't need to take the time to spell it out for you, because I think you already know. You already know that number one, Ruth lost, number one, her husband. That's in chapter 1. She lost her husband. And not only did Ruth lose her husband, but when you read chapter 1, verses 1 through 6, you will discover that she lost her father-in-law before she lost her husband. And sometimes, there are unique relationships that develop between the in-laws. And so, you understand, she could have had a real tight relationship with Elimelech. Not just the fact that she was married to his son, but that, maybe just the fact that she liked him as a person, liked him as a father-in-law, maybe looked up to him, maybe listened to him for advice and counsel and so forth and so on. And so she hadn't just lost her husband, but she's also lost a father-in-law. Wait a minute. Not only a husband and a father-in-law, but she's also lost a brother-in-law. Oh my goodness. Listen, sometimes when it rains, it pours. Hold on. Mahlon and Chilion, two brothers, married to two women from Moab, one by the name of Oprah and the other by the name of Ruth. And here's what we discover. Ruth not only has lost a husband or a spouse, she's also lost a father-in-law, and now she's also lost a brother-in-law. There are three losses that, you understand, have been a part of her life within a time of 10 years or a little bit more. And the reason why I say 10 years is because after Elimelech dies, and then the two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, get married, when you read it in the Bible in verses 1 through 6, you discover it says in a space of time about 10 years, and then the two sons died. So I don't know how long the relationship was before Elimelech died. But let's just say, if you will, that after having arrived in the land, maybe he was there a year or two and he passed. And then after he passed, within a 10-year time frame, then both of his sons passed. And that leaves Ruth having to deal with the loss of a husband and the loss of a father-in-law and the loss of a brother-in-law, all within a span of maybe about 12 years' time. And so it is. Sometime by the time you think you understand, adjusted to the loss of one, now you got to get adjusted to the loss of another and the loss of another. And my goodness, sometimes you wonder, how much more can I bear? How much more can I take? You understand, in relationship to that. So we see her loss. And of course, we can't help but understand that her mother-in-law, Naomi, is also experienced loss, because she lost her husband, that's Elimelech. She lost her two sons, that's Madian and Chilion. And so both of them are dealing with the magnitude of grief, if you will, at the same time, and not necessarily dealing with it in the same way, but dealing with it at the same time, as everything is kind of interconnected and intertwined. And so let me interject possibly another kind of loss. Let me interject another kind of loss that Ruth also experienced, and that is the loss of her sister-in-law. No, the sister-in-law has not died, but the sister-in-law is no longer a part of the equation in chapters 2, 3, and 4. So that means that there are three people, in essence, who were connected to her that she lost because of death. The fourth person that she, I believe, could have some sense of grief about is the fact that now distance has separated her from the sister-in-law. And so it is Oprah. Yeah. Death brought grief in one way. Distance has brought grief in another way. Somebody from my own land, somebody who I grew up with, somebody who I knew, somebody, you understand, who I have probably had a whole lot of conversation with, intimate conversations with. The person who was near and dear to me in this family was also someone that came out of my world, out of my neighborhood in Moab. Now she has moved, Ruth has moved from Moab in chapter 1 to Bethlehem in chapter 2, but Oprah doesn't go to Bethlehem. Oprah stays in Moab. And so that means now Ruth is saying, wait a minute, somebody I had become real comfortable with and all of that, I no longer have that person so close to me. Now they're so distant from me. And I really hate that we ain't like we used to be. I hate that we ain't spending time together. I hate that we ain't talking like we used to talk. I hate that, you understand, we're not right there for each other, you understand, in difficult moments and times. So you can experience grief simply because there's some distance that's been placed between you and somebody who you were real close with, real connected with. I hope you understand what I'm suggesting and saying, that you can go through grief and grieving because of so many different changes that take place in your life. All right, so here's what I'm going to show you. And that is that grief can be experienced because of loss relating to people. You could experience grief in relationship to a sense of loss tied to a place, because Ruth was from Moab and she's got to move from Moab to Bethlehem. And so that means that moving from a familiar place, a familiar area, somewhere where she grew up, somewhere where she knew everybody and everybody knew her, where she could depend on people and maybe people could depend on her. Now it's a whole different world. It's a whole different story. And so it is. You can experience a sense of grief and grieving because you had to relocate, because you had to move, because you had to go somewhere else, because you've now become disconnected from your roots and all of those real relationships that were so important to you. And so um, uh, uh, you can experience grief because of people, and you can experience grief because of the loss of a place, but you can also experience grief because of the loss of possessions, the loss of things. Now, it may not seem like that much to you, but have you ever watched in those moments when there have been, the major catastrophes like fire and flood, and people are standing there, possibly at the place where the fire happened or the flood may have destroyed, their property and everything. And sometimes they're standing there, and what are they thinking about? They're thinking about the things that they used to possess, the things that were material and that were important. They're thankful that they are alive, but they are grieving over the fact that something that was so precious to them, something that had so many memories tied to it, they no longer have that because the fire either burned it up or the floodwaters washed it away and totally destroyed it. And so there's a grieving over the fact that the things that were precious to me in terms of worldly possessions that I no longer have. I no longer have, and I can never get that back again, and so forth and so on. And even in a relationship, I no longer have that person who was like for me a possession, and I can never get that person back again. You can get somebody else, but not get that person back again. And so grief can come from so many different directions. But I want to do this and show you something, if you will, that when I look at the story of Ruth, I believe that um, when she moved, she lost her familiar surroundings. She moved from Moab to Bethlehem. And in this move, she lost her familiar surroundings. She lost her sister in law. Oh, yeah. She lost her familiar surroundings and she lost her sister in law, who she grew up with in Moab. But the point I'm getting ready to make is, and I hope this resonates with somebody, is that she did not lose her sense. Sense. She lost her spouse. She lost her familiar surroundings. She lost her sister in law, not to death, but because of the distance between Moab and Bethlehem. But the great news worthy of celebration is, in the midst of the things that she lost, let's look at what she didn't lose. She did not lose her sense. Now, put this on paper. Don't lose your sense no matter the situation. Listen, I don't care how bad it is. I don't care how dark it is. I don't care how cold it is. I don't. And when I say I don't care, you understand, I don't mean that in a literal sense. I'm just simply saying, don't allow your situation at current to cause you to lose your sense. If you can maintain your sense, if you can maintain your sanity, if you can stay in your right mind, your situation may not be favorable, it may not be what you wanted right now, and you won't want it tomorrow either, and the week after that either, because I don't know if there's ever a good time for us to experience any kind of loss in life. But listen, all I'm simply saying is that there are clearly some things that she did lose, but the greater news is that she did not lose her sense. And if you can maintain your sense, if you can maintain your sense in spite of your struggling and stressful situation, you can make it. Chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4 tell us that Ruth made it because she did not lose her sense, even though she lost her spouse. And even though she lost her familiar surroundings in the land of Moab, and even though she lost her sister in law to distance in the land of Moab, in Bethlehem, she has not lost her sense. And sometimes the thing that really give people trouble is that they lose their sense along with their other sense of loss or the other experience of loss. They just become totally, if you will, imbalanced. But we do not see Ruth being totally imbalanced. And yeah, we don't see that. We don't see that in her being totally imbalanced in spite of the losses she has experienced in her life. So hang on to your good sense in spite of your situation. Now, I'm kind of dropping a little something here, and I hope that while I'm dropping this and trying to stir up something here and make a pretty nice little gumbo for the night. Here's what I want to show you. When you get to verse number 14, get to verse number 14, and if you want to read down there real quick, you'll see what I'm getting ready to say. The Bible says in verse number 14 that Ruth wept again. Hold on. Let me scroll down here on my Bible app and look at it. Verse number 14. And they lifted up their voice. Who is they? That's talking about Naomi. It's talking about Ruth, and it's talking about Oprah. They all lifted up their voice. Don't miss these next three words. And wept again. What's so important about that, Reverend, that they wept again? Well, let's bear in mind that um, um, uh, Ruth has lost her spouse. She has lost her father-in-law. She has lost her brother-in-law. And the Bible says she wept again. Okay, Rev, I ain't feeling it. Okay, here's what I'm getting ready to show you. Is that sometimes as we try to learn how to live with and deal with and adjust to grief and grieving that comes from loss of a loved one or someone real close to us. All I'm trying to say tonight is that when the Bible says she wept again, is that sometimes your grieving is not really dealt with in one good cry. Oh my goodness. Listen, sometimes we think, oh, if I could just get me one good cry, I'll be all right. Well, I want to tell you something. Sometimes, based on who it is in terms of the person that you lost, and based on possibly how they may have died, in their being deceased, was it something real traumatic? Was it something real tragic? Was it some, you understand, awful accident? Was it just natural death? And I understand when someone passes away, when someone dies, the bottom line is you've lost them, but sometimes how you lost them can bring grief to another level of experience in your heart and in your life and in your spirit. So all I'm simply saying that when we read verse number 14, it tells us that she cried more than one time. Grieving is a process. Let me say that one more time. Grieving is a process. Another word would be grieving is a journey. And so don't think that in essence, because you had, your one cry, that you won't need no box of puffs no more. You won't need no handkerchiefs no more. You understand? You'll never cry again. No, you got to understand that there may be some breaks, there may be some periods where you don't weep, but understand that sometime in learning how to get through what you've gone through, you may find yourself crying more than one time. And so If that's you, know this, you're not alone. Why? Because in the Bible says that this woman by the name of Ruth, who had experienced these seasons of grief, found herself weeping again. And so don't think yourself as being a weak Christian or not a Christian because you're crying. Listen, that's a natural human response. But I am getting ready to say something. And when I say it, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be cruel. Here's what I'm getting ready to say. You cannot cry forever. You cannot cry always. You cannot keep on crying as if though you understand that there's just no hope and no help for you and this emotion that you are dealing with. Yes, the Bible said she cried again, but that's in chapter 1. In chapter 2, we don't see her doing any crying. In chapter 3, we don't see her doing any crying. In chapter 4, we don't see her doing any crying. So all I'm simply saying is cry if you must, and cry if you will, and you will cry because when you really love somebody and you lose them, weeping is a natural response. But know this, there will have to come a time when you will sing that song, I've cried my last tear yesterday. You make up in your mind. That's something that happens within your heart, within your spirit. God has given you, if you will, a new resurgence of strength and the ability to recover. And you never forget it in terms of the loss, but you learn how, if you will, to be more accepting, and it doesn't touch you and burden you and break you like it used to. And so she did weep again, but she does not weep forever and ever and ever. And neither should you when you find yourself grieving in life. You've got to be able to move on. You got to be able to move on. Okay, so it's a process. It's a process, and I want to say this to you while I got these few moments left, and that is that after her weeping in chapter 1, verse number 14, after her weeping again, chapter 1, verse number 14, what can we learn about Ruth that may help us on our journey with grief? What can we learn from Ruth that may help us on our journey with grief? Okay, here's what we can do. We can look at the fact that when we get to chapter 2, she has moved on. But before she moves on in chapter 2, there's something that happens in chapter 1, verse number 19. Let me see if I can get down there to it, because now that it's come back to my mind, I want to surely be able to point this out. In chapter 1, verse number 19, here's what happens. And I think that this is such a very powerful point, and I hope it resonates with your spirit. What is it? Here it is. So they too, talking about Ruth and Naomi, so they too went until they came to Bethlehem. Oprah stays in Moab. Naomi and Ruth journey from Moab to Bethlehem. So they too, that's who the Bible is talking about, went until they came to Bethlehem. Okay, Rev, I'm not getting what you're trying to show me. I'm trying to show you between verse number 14, where there is weeping that takes place, and verse number 19, where there is a journey that takes place. Here is what happens. Naomi says to Ruth as well as to Oprah, why don't y'all stay here in Moab and I'm going back to Bethlehem? And Oprah does stay, but Ruth says, no, where you go, that's where I'm going. Where you lodge, that's where I'm going to lodge. Where your God is going to be my God. And so what are you getting to, Rev? I'm getting to the place where, in essence, she said something about what she was going to do. In verses 15 through 18. In verse number 19, she lives up to what she said. Okay. I guess what I'm trying to aim at is the fact that she said, I will do something. What is it that I will do? I will go with you, Naomi. I will go to Bethlehem. I will leave Moab. I will start a new life afresh. I will try to, you understand, have a new beginning in spite of what my ending was here in Moab. I want to have a new beginning and I want to have it in Bethlehem. And so when you go, I'm going with you. Or what you're trying to say, I'm trying to say that there comes a time when you have to say what you will do. There's a time when you got to say what I will get beyond, what I will get over, what I will keep doing, what I will stop doing, what I will try to do, what I will attempt to do, what I will ask God for. Oh, y'all hearing me here? What I will pray and ask God to give. Listen, there comes a time when you got to move from just thinking about something to talking about it. And when you talk about it, say what you will do. And so here's what we learned from Ruth. We learned that whatever she said with her mouth, she was willing to carry out with her action. Oh my goodness. And you've got to become that kind of person to be willing to say, here is what I'm going to do, and then do it. Don't make no excuses. Don't be procrastinating. Don't be putting it off. Don't be saying, I got to wait till I feel better. I got to wait till another day. Well, I got to give it another couple of months and all that type. No. Once you determine what you need to do, then do that. And so we see her going from weeping to exercising her will, to demonstrating her will, to carrying out her will. Oh, I wish I could show you something here. I wish I could show you something here because what we see in her doing that is her wisdom. We see her wisdom. Her wisdom. What do you mean her wisdom? In other words, she made a choice, and the choice she made was the right choice. Hold on. She was given a choice by her mother-in-law, Naomi. She was given a choice. Okay, Ruth, here's what you can do. You can stay here in Moab, and you can marry somebody here in Moab and pick up your life and go on and live life, so forth and so on. Or, that's what I prefer for you to do. But if you say you're going to go with me, then that's your choice. You can go with me, but I'm going to Bethlehem. And if you're going to Bethlehem, you better be ready to roll when I get ready to roll. When I back this car out the driveway, you need to be in the front seat on the passenger side, because that's where I'm driving to Bethlehem. And I can go by myself, but if you want to go, you need to get in the car, because I ain't going to put you in there. You have to choose to be in there. And that's what she did. She exercised wisdom in making the choice to go from Moab, where she was, you understand, dealing with her grief, to going to Bethlehem, where she gets beyond her grief. And you need to make some choices. You need to make some decisions. You need to exercise some wisdom in making some decisions and choices that's going to advance your future, that's going to better your future, that's going to prosper your way. And how do we know that? Because when we look at chapters 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4, she made the right decision. And that was to leave Moab, the place of her grief, and to go to Bethlehem, the place that really became the place of her blessing. Okay. So much for that. Listen, I'm finna close because I know I'm out of time. I'm finna close. But if you can say this with me, the girl moved on. Oh, my Lord. The girl moved on. She lost her husband. Oh, yes, she did. She lost her father-in-law. Yes, she did. She lost her brother-in-law. Yes, she did. She even lost her dear longtime friend, Oprah. Not to death, but to the distance between Moab and Bethlehem. But here's what I want to tell you, that in dealing with her grief, she realized what I got to do is I got to move on. I can't park here. I can't stay here. I can't let myself, you understand, be anchored down with grief in Moab. I've got to move on. There's still time on my clock. My clock of life is still ticking. And there's no reason for me to sit here and have a pity party for the rest of my life. No reason for me to sit here with my head in my hands the rest of my life feeling sorry for myself. It's time to move on. Listen, I don't know who I'm talking to. I don't know who I'm talking to, but quite possibly I'm talking to you tonight. And that is that there comes a time when you got to accept the fact I love them, but life has taken them from me, and I've got to learn how to move on and to live the rest of my life. To live the rest of my life. And living the rest of my life doesn't mean I'm dishonoring them. It doesn't mean that I am dissing myself from them, being disconnected from them. It's simply saying that in essence, God is still giving me life, and I want to be able to live that life to the fullest I can. And so that maybe what I need to do is I need to consider moving on. Hold on. Not only does she move on, but the question is, who did she move on with? Oh, my Lord. Who is she with? She's with Naomi. Can I suggest to you tonight that sometimes when you're grieving, you need to be sure that when you're moving on with somebody who you can trust. You're moving on with somebody who you can identify with. You're moving on with somebody who can help you. You're moving on with somebody who can model for you the kind of strength that you ought to have. Remember now, not only is Ruth grieving, but Naomi is grieving. And maybe what we're going to learn is that Naomi is a model for Ruth. And Ruth is learning something from Naomi about how to get through your season. And so be sure that as you are moving on, you're moving on with somebody who you can be spiritually connected to. Remember what Ruth said to Naomi? She said, your God will be my God. And that's what I need. I need somebody who has a God who can help me through my season of sadness and sorrow and grief. I need a prayer partner. I need somebody who's a confidant. I need somebody who understands where I am on life's journey. And so it is. She moves on, but she moves on with the right somebody. I can't tell you how important it is to be sure that you're connected to somebody who you can really get some strength from, get some help from. Are y'all hearing me here? Listen, not only did she move on, and not only did she move on with the right somebody, but here's the next thing is she moved around. She moved around. Okay, real, I ain't feeling that one. Okay, here what you understand now. There are 4 chapters. In chapter number 1, there is the loss. In chapter number 2, she in essence is unemployed and she don't have no work and all of that type of stuff. She ain't got no money. Chapter number 3, focusing on her singleness, but we also discover that she goes to work. Who does she go to work? She goes to work, you understand, gathering stuff behind what's called the reapers. And so she is the person who, in essence, who gets to Bethlehem, and rather than staying locked up in the house, she said, I got to get out of this house. I can't move to Bethlehem and be a hermit. I can't move to Bethlehem and stay isolated from people. I know I don't know these people. These people don't know me. She said, but I can't stay locked up in this house. I got to get out. I got to do something. I got to go somewhere. I got to meet people. You understand? And so when I say she moved around, I'm simply saying she did not become the kind of person who says that I can't afford to be around nobody. I ain't got time to be bothered with people. You understand? I don't know these people, and I'm a foreigner in their land, and they don't care nothing about me, and I don't know if I really care that much about them. The only person I really care about is Naomi. And so when we look at her life story, we see her as a person who says, I know I've been grieving, but I've got to get out of this house. I'm in Bethlehem. I got to get out of this house. I got to go out and do something. I got to get around other people. And possibly getting around these other people is going to open up some opportunities for me, open up some doors for me, open up some new relationships for me, open up some new friendships for me. How in the world do you think she met Boaz? She met Boaz because she refused to stay locked up in the closet of grief and locked up in the prison of a house and saying, I can't go out. I got to stay inside. I'm scared of everything and scared of everybody. No, she got out. She went to the fields to labor so that she could make her some money. And then that's where she got discovered because she was willing to move around, move around. All right. I'm through when I tell you this. She didn't just she didn't just move on, and she didn't just move with the right somebody. She didn't just move around and get, you understand, visibility and connected with other people and develop other relationships. Here's the last thing is she moved up. Oh, how did she move up, Reb? She moved up because she met a man by the name of Boaz. And Boaz watched her. Boaz noticed her as she was moving around, being who she was, moving around, doing what she do, moving around. You understand? She wasn't trying to be nobody else, act like nobody else. She wasn't trying to put on no style show and all that, hoping, you understand. But all she did was did what she knew she needed to do for herself, for her own sanity, because of her own sense that she still had. She moved around, and guess what? She got noticed by Boaz, and she ends up getting married, not to Bozo, but to Boaz. See, you don't want to get married to a Bozo. Lord have mercy. No. Anybody remember Bozo the clown from way back in the day? You don't want to get married to a Bozo. You don't want to get connected to a Bozo. And Bozo doesn't have to be a man. Bozo could be a woman. You could be a man who is single, but you don't want to get married to a Bozo that's a woman. And the woman don't want to get married to a man who's a Bozo the clown. You want to get married to a Boaz, somebody who know how to treat you right, somebody who know how to talk to you right, somebody who know how to love you right, somebody who know how to do everything to help you move beyond the season of grief. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that Boaz ever tried to take the place of the man she was married to. No. I don't believe that. I believe he just took the place of being the man who he was for her in that season. And so, listen, I'm through. And all I want to say to you is I'm getting ready to go. I don't know if you're looking to be able to be reconnected to somebody, if you're single, if you're divorced, if you're a widow. I don't know if that's on your calendar, on your itinerary, on your agenda. It may not very well be, but I think that you ought to at least consider those other three things. That you ought to say, it's time for me to move on in some ways. It's time for me to be sure I'm moving with the right people in some ways. And it's time for me to be sure that I'm around people who can help me to fulfill my goals in life. And so I wanted to be able to make something of myself. I wanted to be able to have a little something. And so what did I do? I followed behind people who were going where I was trying to go. I followed behind people who were workers because I'm a worker. I followed behind people who wanted better because I wanted better. I followed behind people who were not lazy and trifling because I'm not a lazy and trifling person. Who was she following? She was around people who had the same kind of mind and mentality and being goal oriented as she was. You got to be sure that if you want to go somewhere, that you're behind somebody who's going somewhere. If you want to get something, you're behind somebody who's trying to get something. I'm through. I'm out of here. Listen, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you. May the Lord grant and give you peace. Read the book of Ruth, and I pray it'll become an inspiration for you, as I hope it will be even so for others. We're out.